No, this is next, darling. Until Trump reappoints, okay, who's after that? In line of succession? What? Paul Ryan from Wisconsin, from Janesville, Wisconsin. When reminded of the thousands of people in his district who would be thrown off of medical care or medical insurance if Obamacare was repealed, Ryan shrugged and giggled. Yes, it is. So is he. But you can do that if you want. It makes $100,000 a year as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., which Joe Ryan does. All right. So, for those of you who need motivation, which should be all of you, this next bit is going to be the answer. You're going to write this shit down. I know you all have to write this shit down. The next part about the official presidential functions and unofficial presidential duties will be the answer to question 2 sub B on the final. I say again, 2 sub B on the final. You might should ought to pay attention. All right. Article 2 of the Constitution is the part of the original Constitution that dealt with the president. And as I might have mentioned in here before, you can tell the framers got tired as the summer wore on. Because Article 1, a lot of crap, real detail. Article 1 is the Congress. Article 2 is the president. They have sort of general duties that are ascribed to him, but nothing like Article 1, Section 8 with that long detailed list of enumerated powers. And Article 3, Section 1, you can have some courts, including a Supreme Court. Section 2, and they ought to talk about the following general subject matter, period, end of report. Oh, and you can make more courts if you want to. Yes, dear.
So on Monday. I thought you said the office presides over the Senate, like the vice president presides over the Senate,
right.
And I thought you said Article 1. Is it 2?
It's in Article 1, no, because Article 1 says this is an officer in the Senate. So and that's also where all the impeachment stuff is, because those are legislative functions. And I'm pretty sure they knew they were going to have a vice president when they wrote that, but it is actually part of how Congress does its business, as is potentially impeachment. So that's why you see stuff in Article 1 that has impact on other areas of the Constitution.
Thank you.
Incidentally, I'm not going to pay homage to it, but Monday is Constitution Day. Yay, rah. I'm not making this shit up. It really is. Does anybody know what Tuesday, the 19th of September is?
Tuesday?
The day after my... No, it's my mom's birthday.
Okay, well, now you know what you should be doing over the weekend. At least get her a card, even if you can't afford a gift.
My dad's the 18th, so got 2.
Oh, God. What is the 19th of September?
A date.
What?
A date.
A date, a special date. What is the special day that it is?
The 19th of September.
No, darling. 19th of September is Talk Like a Pirate Day. It is the official Talk Like a Pirate Day.
That's great.
Oh,
We all need to participate in that.
yes.
What's a pirate's favorite country? Argentina.
You couldn't get away with that in high school, right? That's where you do it here. Alright, so the question 2 sub B on the final requires you to fully explain those dreadful words. The 5 official presidential functions and the 5 unofficial presidential duties. And lo, if you look on the present handout, we have listed numbered 1 through 5 official presidential functions and lettered A through E unofficial duties. So, the first, and each of these official functions can be traced directly or indirectly to some language in Article 2. So, the first thing that we have listed here, not in order of importance, just in order of it occurred to me when I was writing this thing. The president is head of state. He is the warm body who represents all 300 million plus of us. When we need to be represented in some function, he's there. Typically, this takes one of two possible forms. One, the president as head of state recognizes noteworthy accomplishments. Thus, the president welcomes and congratulates, or will welcome and congratulate, the winning team for the World Series, the winning team for the Super Bowl, the winning team, etc., etc. Next month is Nobel Prize season. The president will invite to a reception the U.S. Nobel Prize winner, of which there are usually some. Previously, before the current occupant of the White House, the president would have a reception for the Kennedy Center Honors for National Order of Merit, which is usually artistic kinds of stuff. But since a number of the winners said they would not go to the White House, President Trump has decided, honest to God, starting with Norman Lear, President Trump has decided to eschew that particular aspect of his function. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. It just boggled my mind when Trump invited the Patriots after they won the Super Bowl, and what was a stirring success. No, seriously, they came from way back and won. Okay. Tom Brady didn't go to the White House, and Tom Brady was an early endorser of Donald Trump in his candidacy, so I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, so they he recognizes noteworthy accomplishments, and it's not just the biggies. Honest to God, the girl in each state who sells the most Girl Scout cookies is recognized, or let's be honest here, whose parents managed to nag their acquaintances and distant relatives to buy an ungodly amount of those things. And I must tell you, having observed this process over many, many years, that the number of cookies has steadily declined within each box, even though the box size remains pretty much constant.
Yep.
We don't have anybody in here in Girl Scouts or Girl Scout leader, right? I do not want Thin Mints, Caravels. I'm neutral about. I like that
love
lemon
Thin
stuff.
Mints.
What?
I love Thin Mints.
So we could split one if they gave us an assorted thing. Okay. So they're going to be the Girl Scouts who sell the most cookies are going to be recognized. If you don't like doing this, like Richard Nixon, you got to spend 30 to 40% of your day doing this photo op stuff. If you really, really enjoy it, like Ronald Reagan, it could be north of 65% of your day, shaking hands and getting a picture there. But it's a tremendous drain of energy and time. Now, in Europe, I don't want to say they're smarter, but frequently they are. In Europe, what the Europeans do is they split the duties of head of state and chief executive. They have one person who's the official head of state for the photo ops, like Queen Elizabeth II of England, and the rest of her family. And then in England, as in most other countries, there's a functioning chief executive, usually called the prime minister. In Russia, of course, the guy who is who runs the show is going to be Putin. Doesn't matter what his job title is. Remember I told you that about when there was an attempt to overthrow Gorbachev? Okay. And at that time, people were terribly afraid that if Gorbachev had been overthrown, the KGB would have taken over. Do you know what Putin's job used to be before he took over as prime minister, president, whatever it is this week?
KGB?
He was head of the KGB. So we're where we were afraid of being in 1991. Happy thought. On the other hand, the guy he switches titles with, a guy named Medvedev, breakdances. Well, that's his sole talent in life, as near as I can ascertain. But they used when he took over as president the first time, Putin term limited out. There you see the president of Russia. So Russia breakdancing for the cameras. So it's fascinating. But here we decide to combine chief executive and head of state, which is why presidents look so much older when they come out of office than when they went in. Bill Clinton, when he started in 1990, after the 1992 election, had a head full of brown hair. If you've seen pictures of him in the last 8 years, it's all white, whiter than mine. Okay. So chief executive, the president, and I'm choosing my words carefully. The president is responsible for the executive branch. Responsible for the executive branch. He is blamed for what the executive branch folk do. And when I say they're somewhere in the vicinity of 3 million, you got about 2 million of those are in the armed forces. And another 1 million civilian employees, yes, here.
For head of state, you said there were 2 things that we.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you, because I was just rolling my chief executive thing. The other thing is head of state, the president does is he meets other heads of state. So when the president is shaking hands with Angela Merkel of Germany, that's all of us shaking hands with all of the Germans who are much more financially secure than we are, and who we expect to bail out Europe from time to time economically. But when they have like White House dinners, that's all of us theoretically, symbolically being invited to that.
Let's go.
I said symbolically. And they have lots of those fork things, and you gotta figure out what the hell to do with the fork that's up here going crossways. No, dear, that's, I discovered this. I was at a dinner down at Champaign for a World Complexity Conference. That was where they brought me in, because I had, at that point, analyzed, I think, 19 revolutions, which is like 6 times plus more than Peter Scotiabank had done. This is a big deal. And I was on a panel, and the next smallest number of cases analyzed was 14,000 that had to do with cells in the bloodstream. And it's like they sort of patted me on the head. That's okay, at least you tried. You know, it's not like political science is a real science. That's okay. But anyway, they had the fork up here, and that's for seafood, apparently. Oh.
It's for seafood, because like when you like get like crabs or like stuff out of like crab leg, it like pulls it out easier.
We had 2 kids from Indonesia who explained it. Okay, so chief executive, what we're most concerned with. He's responsible for the executive branch, for its actions. Now, most of the folk in the executive branch are there under some version of what's called civil service. I will explain to you the theory of civil service. Do not bother me with your stories of what happens at the post office or whatever. All right, in theory, in civil service, you as a job seeker take a test, and in theory, this test measures how well you will do the job. And these tests are advertised every so often when there are going to be openings in a particular job category, and people come in and they take the test and they're ranked based upon how well they do. And then the jobs are offered in the order of those rankings. So the top ranked guy or gal gets an offer, and second, if you have like 6 openings, the first 6 get the offers. Now they may not decide to take that. Some of them may not decide to take the offer, but that's the idea. So one of your predecessors, who drops in here from time to time at the end of class, Ryan Nudd, who will be a damn good cop, was testing for the first time over at Round Lake. And he passed the test. I'm not astonished that he passed the test, but the first time, he's not done with college yet. And he passed the test. I mean, he didn't score high enough to get hired over there, but I told him, Ryan, if they hire you, be sure to wear your best at all times, because it's, after all, Round Lake. So you're hired based on objective assessment of how well you will do the job. And there are various components of the various tests. I mean, Do you know stuff? Are you physically fit? And now they like to see, are you crazy as a loon? They have some psychological evaluation. Well, you know, if you're giving somebody guns, you really want them to be mentally sane and remain that way. And the levels of testing will vary based upon the jobs that are being offered. So notice, hiring based on objectivity as opposed to who you know. And then once you're in a job, you're evaluated, again, on theoretically objective criteria. You have a written performance assessment that is completed by your superior periodically. I'll come back and give you an example when I was in the Army. And then that evaluation is countersigned by your superiors. So if you got a personality conflict going on, you got sort of a check on the fact that your boss hates your guts for whatever reason. And based upon how well you do on those efficiency reports, you may be eligible for promotion, or you may be eligible for stay in the same job, or you may be eligible for discipline. And also, if you screw up bad, you may be eligible for discipline, but they will have an established procedure for dealing with your mistake, for lack of a better term. And if you do bad enough, often enough, there's a policy in place for getting rid of you. So typically what happens is you screw up or you don't do well on your performance evaluation, and you're warned, hey, stop doing that. And here's a way to make sure that you learn how to do what you're supposed to be doing. And if you still keep doing the bad thing, then you get a second warning. And if you really don't get it and do the bad thing a third time, there's what's called remediation, where they send somebody in to hold your hand and try to show you this is the way you do things and this is what you don't do. And if you keep screwing up, they will terminate you or fire your ass. But notice there's some sort of due process that's involved there, at least theoretically due process. So when I was in the Army, every month my battery, the company commander, my battery commander would write an officer efficiency report once a month. These things, unless they burned up in the fire in 1974, these things are in St. Louis someplace. And he has a whole bunch of things he's supposed to be rated me on. He said, yes, Lieutenant Newman knows what he's doing. Yes, he knows how to adjust for auxiliary fire. No, he does not play well with others, but that's okay because he's a forward observer, which means he's way the hell down from the rest of the unit. And I hereby say he's got a 98% rating or 100% rating on all these criteria. And so these things are filed, and over time, because it's very easy to get from second lieutenant to first lieutenant, eventually, in the fullness of time, I was promoted to first lieutenant because of objective evaluation of my ability to be a forward observer in the field artillery. If I have, I don't know, left ammunition unguarded someplace and it had been stolen, then I would have gotten a warning letter saying, hey, you're not supposed to leave 155 howitzer shells out there where the bad guys can get it to make bombs with. Excuse me, improvised explosive devices with. And if I did it again, it would have been a serious reprimand. And if I'd done it the third time, they would have said, here, we're going to have somebody come in and explain to you how you make sure you've got a guard over explosives that can kill our guys. And if I'd done it the fourth time, they would have said, see ya. Yes, sir.
So, is it only keep doing the same thing over and over, or is it like you did that and then you also like, I don't know, left you took everyone's shoes and put them in the river, and then you also like, could it get multiple different things, or does it have to do the same thing over?
I will be honest with you, I do not know the answer to that question. My sense is that if you screw up repeatedly, they're going to bounce your ass one way or the other. And have we discussed the colloquial verb from Vietnam to frag in here? We have not. Okay, in Vietnam. And they went by different names in the other wars we did. In Vietnam, if you had an officer who was just a pain in the ass and placed his men in danger, usually it's happening in infantry, the infantry would express their dislike for this process by pulling him a fragmentation grenade and rolling it under his bunk while he was asleep. thus to frag. He was fragged, you know. So I suspect, particularly the whole take people's shoes and throw them in the creek, that's a fragging, I think, right there. Because you realize you're pissing off people who have got M16s with live rounds in them, which is not the best idea. Good question, though. I don't know. It depends on the creativity of the offending party. Or you could be, they could write you up for like general categories. Okay. Sexual harassment can take a variety of forms, as we see with 500. But if you write somebody up for sexual harassment, you don't have to say, well, you shouldn't send pictures of your naked self to somebody who didn't ask for it, and you shouldn't pat your coworkers on the butt when you walk past them, or any of those other things. Yeah, well, that's they would just bust him on sexual harassment grounds, generally. Okay, so that's about 2.9 million people right there that are protected from the president's actions in terms of being hired, disciplined, promoted, or fired. The top 100,000 people in the executive branch are what are called policymakers. They make rules, and we're going to cover this in greater depth next week. They make rules and regulations. Now, the president may appoint policymakers subject to senatorial confirmation. So, say the head of the Federal Reserve Board. Trump can appoint someone, and then a majority of the Senate has to approve that. So he can't necessarily hire someone. And once you've got somebody in, like FBI director, he is theoretically in for a fixed term of years. Now, Comey was fired because his term of office was up as acting director, and that was why he was fired. But normally, if you appoint somebody for the 7-year term of FBI director, that person, or SEC commissioner, or FTC commissioner, or director of environmental protection, or whatever, that person is in for the duration of that fixed number of years. And that's what these two cases are about. Humphrey's executor and Weiner. These deal with attempts on the part of presidents, FDR in the first case, Eisenhower in the second, to fire somebody who was a policymaker. And the Supreme Court in these two cases said you can't fire somebody who's a policymaker, no matter how much you dislike his policy or her policy. You can only fire somebody who's a policymaker before their term of office is up for crimes of what they call moral turpitude, which is basically embezzlement and bribery. And we're moving, and I'm happy to see us moving in the direction of saying, oh, by the way, sexual harassment is moral turpitude as well. Also, if you're caught with some sort of perjury, it's moral turpitude. Perjury.
Some moral what?
T-I-T-U-D-E-E. Judge Joe Brown used to love to throw that around. That's basically dishonesty. But there's a lot of stuff that should be grounds for firing that is not on that list. Thus, back in '81, the chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission was a guy named Thomas Fetters, who stood 6'6", and was married to a girl 5'2", and probably shorter than that. And Fetters used to relieve his tension by beating her. And he was outed on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. For those of you who don't know, the Wall Street Journal is very pro-finance and very right-wing. So this guy, who was a Reagan appointee, was outed as doing bad stuff by the Wall Street Journal. I'm pretty sure he was doing it. And Reagan didn't fire him. I mean, eventually the national press shamed him into resigning. And the reason behind this policy is articulated in Humphrey's Executor. The idea that, as we'll see next week, agencies make rules. It's called rule making or regulation making activity. And rules explain in detail what federal statutes mean. Thus, for example, the Food and Drug Administration is given the job to make sure that we have pure food and safe and effective drugs. And so there are hundreds of pages of regulations saying in a particular instance what a pure food is, what a safe and effective drug is. We can start with the idea that if the drug is safe, it is not effective. If it's effective, it ain't safe. One of the joys in about 50 years when you get here to my age is that you're going to be on various meds, and each med is going to have a side effect, and sometimes if the side effects are bad enough, your doctor will give you a drug for that side effect, which creates yet more side effects. And one of the things that doctors who specialize in old people tend to do is if they see you're on 4 different meds, which have got side effects, sometimes they just take you off the whole shebang to begin with to see what is the side effect and what is the underlying condition. So, actually right now I don't have much in the way of side effects, but I have had side effects with some meds they've given me where the muscles in my face would freeze into some sort of a gargoyle face, and I had to get a shot to relax that. We went off that one real quick. Back, as we will talk about, as we have talked about, back when Prozac was the solution to everybody's physical ills, Mrs. Newman's doctor put her on Prozac for no real good reason, except she was having a lack of energy because she was having to shepherd me through life. And so when she realized that she was seriously figuring out how to kill her coworkers who were annoying her, she said, I probably should go off of this. So if it's an effective drug, it is not safe. Because it means it ain't doing anything. If it's a safe drug, you might as well just go get some M&Ms because they taste better. Unless you're allergic to chocolate. So the FDA has all these hundreds of pages saying this is what constitutes a safe and effective drug in this particular kind of drug or in this particular kind of illness, or this is what a pure food is. Do not read the regulations about what is a pure hot dog ever in life if you ever want to enjoy hot dog. And so when an agency is making rules like that, they're acting like Congress. Of course, we can't say acting like Congress because people aren't impressed with your intellectual capacity when you say like, particularly nowadays when it's like people's third word, every third word. So instead of saying like, we say quasi, which is a Greek prefix meaning like. Hey, it sounds really smart, doesn't it? Okay? You try this on your dad. Go home and say, Daddy, I learned a new word today, quasi-legislative, and he'll think the tuition he's paying for you is worthwhile. And later on, when individuals are accused of violating a rule, the agency sits as judge and jury, as we'll see next week. So they're acting like a court. So it's quasi-judicial activity. And just as the president cannot fire members of Congress however much he would like to, or federal judges however much he would like to, so the Supreme Court back in 1935 decided the president cannot fire a policymaker with the exception of moral turpitude grounds, because the policymaker stands in the same position as Congress and the federal courts. Okay. The third thing the president does, yes, sir.
The only thing about that whole FDA argument is that they really don't have to. Most people don't really have to listen to them. They can just make the excuse that it's pending under the FDA.
Oh yeah, I know. I remember I used to be a corporate lawyer. You can play those games. Yeah, I know. And sometimes a drug which is intended for one disease can be applied to another. I was very sad when there's apparently a drug that's used for type 2 diabetes that is supposed to stop the degeneration of the neural cells of people with Parkinson's. But two problems. One, that was for people with upper body tremors, which I don't have. And two, the sample size was very small, 62 people, and the duration of the trial was only 1 year. Now, you are all too young, but once upon a time, steroids were supposed to be really, really good for you. Really, really, no downside whatsoever to steroids. You just get big and strong if you take steroids. And it wasn't until steroids have been used in massive doses over several years that all sorts of bad things happen. You get cancer. If you want to feel sad sometime, go back and look at pictures and possibly video of a guy named Lyle Alzado, who was a